Baltimore, 1972. In the cold that slipped through the cracks of the old tenement, Darnell Carter, an automotive painter forgotten by the shops that exploited him, faced a detail no one cared about, a piece of metal so dull it seemed to have given up shining forever. 3 professionals had already tried to fix it. All failed. The car's owner had accepted its fate, but Darnell tried something different, a strange motion with a cheap piece of sandpaper, a gesture any expert would call a mistake. And there, in that silent instant, something impossible happened. This is the story of a poor, exhausted, underestimated man who lived between overdue bills, promises made to his mother, and a garage that barely kept out the wind. A man who had little more than his cracked hands and a stubborn refusal to sink. What Darnell discovered that dawn wasn't luck, nor a miracle. It was the first step in a change the whole of Baltimore would never have dared to predict. A path built on quiet defeats, small hidden victories, doors that only open for those who insist, and how a single glimmer can alter the destiny of an entire family. Without revealing what comes next, I'll only say this. Darnell Carter thought he was just polishing a car. In truth, he was polishing the future. But before we continue with the video, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The wind was the first sound that filled the back of the tenement. A cold, restless Baltimore wind that slipped through every crack in the wooden walls of the small garage. It carried the smell of coal smoke, fried onions from the corner store, and winter itself. Inside, under a trembling bulb, Darnell Carter leaned over the hood of a faded Buick Skylark, his breath fogged in the air. His hands, cracked from long days at Henderson's auto paint, moved with slow, tired precision. He wasn't supposed to be working tonight, not after 11 hours of sanding and buffing for men who never said his name right. But the electric company had left another reminder on their door, and reminders didn't wait, so he kept working. The sandpaper dragged in worn circles, grain against steel. Nothing shined, nothing improved. It felt like sanding the same spot of his life over and over without progress. Behind him, the garage door creaked open. "You'll freeze out here," his mother said softly. Evelyn Carter stood bundled in a thin coat, her wrists red from a full day scrubbing laundry for families who paid in smiles more than dollars. She was a small woman, but she had a way of filling a room simply by loving the people in it. "I'm almost done, Mama," Darnell said without looking up. "You said that an hour ago." "It's important," she sighed, not with anger, but with the quiet resignation of someone who has survived too much to believe in easy miracles. "You're working yourself hollow, child. I'll rest when things get better," he whispered. "When have things ever gotten better without rest first?" she murmured, but he didn't answer. She walked around the Buick, touched the cold metal with careful fingers. "You always treat these old cars like they can hear you. They listen better than most folks." Evelyn smiled, small and sad, then turned toward the door. The bills on the table. Darnell stopped sanding, just for a heartbeat. "Put it there, Mama. I'll handle it." She nodded and left, pulling the door shut against the wind. Silence settled back in. Darnell switched sandpaper, grabbing a cheap sheet, the kind real professionals mocked, the kind he bought because it was all he could afford. He pressed it to the hood, expecting the same dull, lifeless result. But the sound changed, and the feel changed. He paused, listening with his fingertips. Then he wiped the spot gently. A faint glow shimmered back at him, not bright, but deep, like the paint had taken a breath. He blinked, leaned closer. The glow vanished. "Come on," he muttered. "Not now." He tried again. Same motion, same pressure, nothing. He inhaled slowly, switched the angle, and let instinct guide his wrist. Soft circles, lighter touch, barely enough water to moisten the grit. There. A dark, rich shine returned. It held, stayed, waited. Darnell stared at it like it wasn't real. He wiped again. Still there. He pressed his thumb into the surface. Smooth, smoother than it should have been from a sheet of cheap sandpaper. What in the world? He checked the bulb above him. It flickered, but the shine stayed. For the first time that night, he felt a small, sharp spark inside his chest. Curiosity mixed with fear. Men like him didn't stumble into discoveries. Men like him worked and worked and worked until their bodies quit before the world ever noticed. But this was different. The radio crackled in the corner. A preacher's voice rose between static. "God puts tools in the hands that need them most." Darnell rolled his eyes but couldn't shake the words. He repeated the motion again. Exact circles. Same grip, same speed. The shine bloomed deeper. It wasn't just better than normal, it was impossible. He grabbed his small notebook and scribbled the sequence down with shaking hands. Cheap grit, light pressure, backwards circles, water, minimal. It looked stupid on paper, like something a rookie would try before a real painter corrected him. But the result didn't lie. A knock tapped the door. Earl, one of the neighbors who drifted more than worked, pushed his head inside. "Man, you still out here making that junk shine?" "Working," Darnell said. "Always working. You know, Carter, you keep messing with paint long enough, you're gonna find something crazy." Darnell's eyes drifted to the glowing patch. "Maybe." Earl snorted. "Right. Anyway, you give rides tomorrow morning?" "Not at 6 again." "Come on, man." I said no. Earl shrugged and left, letting the cold rush in before the door thudded shut again. The garage felt different now, like the air had thickened with possibility. Darnell leaned over the hood once more and rested his hand over the shimmering area. It didn't fade. It didn't cloud. It held steady, deep and wet-looking, like no car he had ever buffed in his life. He thought of his father, hands stained with machine grease, telling him at 12 years old, "Boy, sometimes God hides the answer in the mistake." He thought of his mother, folding clothes, humming through exhaustion, still believing in him even when he didn't. And for the first time in a long while, Darnell wondered if maybe, just maybe, the world had missed something about him, something he hadn't seen either. He stepped back, exhaled, wrote the sequence again, firmer this time. Then he whispered to the empty room, "This ain't nothing, or it's everything." The lamp flickered once and held steady. The glow on the Buick did the same, and in that cold, cramped garage behind the tenement, a man who had nothing finally touched the first quiet spark of what would change the rest of his life. Morning came without mercy. Baltimore always woke hard, like a city tired of dragging itself through yesterday. Delivery trucks roared down the streets before sunrise. Radios blared soul music through thin walls. Somewhere in the tenement, a baby cried while a couple argued over cold oatmeal. Life didn't wait for anyone, least of all for men like Darnell Carter. But inside the narrow garage behind the building, the strange glow on the Buick's hood had survived the night. Darnell stood in front of it, jacket still on, breath fogging in the cold. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that deep, impossible shine blooming under his fingertips. Now, in the gray light of morning, it was still there, steady, dark, alive in a way he didn't understand. He ran his hand over the spot, smooth, too smooth. He picked up the same cheap sandpaper from the night before and tested another section, using the same backward circles every painter avoided. And just like before, the glow rose slowly through the dull paint. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. It worked twice. Before he could test it again, a voice barked from outside. "Carter, you coming or not?" It was Mr. Henderson, standing beside his truck with a coffee cup and the usual impatient scowl. Darnell locked the garage door, pocketed his notebook, and followed him. The Buick's glow stayed behind, pulsing softly under the dying bulb. At the shop, the day unfolded the way most days did. Hot air, loud men, grinding machines, and Henderson pacing around like every minute of everyone's time belonged to him. The place smelled of paint fumes, sweat, and cigarettes. It was the smell of survival, but never of progress. As soon as Darnell clocked in, Tommy wandered over with that crooked grin he wore whenever trouble was close behind. "Heard you been busy at home," Tommy said, leaning on a workbench like he owned it. Darnell didn't look at him. "Got side jobs. That's not news." "Not talking about the jobs," Tommy said. "Talking about that shine." Darnell's hands froze around the sandpaper. He forced himself to keep moving. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." Tommy smirked, eyes mean. "But others do." Before Darnell could respond, Henderson shouted from the far side of the shop, and the moment broke. But Tommy's words didn't leave him. They hissed in the back of his mind all morning, twisting tighter every time someone glanced in his direction. At lunchtime, while the others smoked outside, Darnell stayed at his station. He wasn't hungry. His thoughts kept circling the shine, the sequence, the risk. When you were poor, even your discoveries belonged to someone else the moment they noticed you had them. He was wiping down a Mustang fender when a man in a brown coat approached. Not a worker, but a customer with clean shoes and curious eyes. "You're Carter, right?" the man asked. Darnell nodded, cautious. "I heard," the man said quietly, "that you're doing something different, something with the shine, something better." The words hit him like a shove. Cold washed through his chest. "I don't do anything special," Darnell replied. "That's not what Henderson's boys say." Tommy, again, his mouth, his jealousy, his danger. The man took out a small card and held it toward Darnell. "If you ever want extra work, real work, the kind that pays, I got 3 cars waiting. Whatever you're doing, I want it. Darnell stared at the card. 3 cars meant real money. Money his mother desperately needed. Money that could keep the lights on for more than a week. But taking the job meant someone was already watching his hands too closely. I'll think about it, Darnell said. Think fast, the man replied. Secrets don't stay secret long in this town. When he walked away, Darnell's stomach twisted. Secrets. The Shine was barely born and already someone wanted to own it or steal it. By the end of the shift, he was exhausted in a way deeper than muscle. The cold outside bit harder as he walked home through alleys, scattered with bottles and newspaper scraps. The tenement loomed ahead, every window glowing a different shade of struggle. He pushed open the garage door. The lamp flickered to life. The Shine waited. He stepped inside slowly, almost reverently. The Buick looked tired, old, but under that patch of paint was something new, something valuable, something the world had never shown him before. He touched it again, still smooth, still deep, still impossible. How did you happen? He whispered. The room didn't answer, but something inside him did. He picked up the sandpaper and repeated the motion on another panel. Small circles, backward pressure, water enough only to moisten, not soak. A soft glow bled through. He did it again. Glow, again, glow, again, glow. A pattern, not luck. A formula trying to reveal itself. He flipped open his notebook and wrote everything down with trembling hands. The cheap grit. The backward motion. The pressure that was more intuition than science. He circled the note twice, underlined it, stared at it. This wasn't an accident. It was the first step towards something he didn't dare name out loud. But as he stood there, sandpaper in hand, breath visible in the freezing air, a sudden realization crawled through him like a warning. People were already looking. Tommy, the customer, whispers floating through shops and alleys. He was standing on the edge of a discovery and the edge of danger. The garage felt smaller. The walls felt closer. The Shine looked brighter. And for the first time in his life, Darnell felt a strange mixture of dread and hope twisting together in his chest. He rested both hands on the hood and closed his eyes. If this is real, he murmured, I can't let nobody take it. His breath trembled as he opened his eyes again. The glow stared back like it agreed. Outside, the wind rattled the door. Somewhere in the building, someone shouted at a radio. Baltimore kept moving, loud and uncaring. But inside that little garage, something had awakened. Something fragile, something powerful, something that would change everything if he could hold on to it long enough. And as the lamp flickered once more, Darnell whispered the truth he was finally brave enough to say, "This is mine." Night settled over Baltimore like a heavy coat, thick enough to muffle the city, but not warm enough to comfort it. Street lights flickered along the cracked sidewalks. A siren moaned somewhere far off, and in the narrow alley behind the tenement, only one window glowed, the lamp inside Darnell Carter's garage. He stood alone over the Buick's hood, sleeves rolled to the elbows, breath shallow with anticipation. The world outside had grown quiet, but the world inside him had not. His mind buzzed with the strange, impossible shine he'd pulled from cheap tools and instinct alone. Tonight wasn't about luck. Tonight was about proof. He laid out everything he owned: a plastic bowl of water, worn cloths, 4 sheets of cheap sandpaper, and a pencil that had been sharpened so many times it was barely a stub. The notebook lay open beside him, illuminated by the trembling lamp. He touched the page. 3 words stared back. It's something real. He didn't need motivation. He needed control. Darnell dipped his fingers into the water, letting the cold numbness settle in. He grabbed the sandpaper, Grit 400, the kind they sold in bulk because nobody serious wanted it, and pressed it lightly against the Buick's worn surface. But this time he didn't rush. He didn't guess. He listened. Every painter he'd worked under had drilled rules into him. Never sand backward, never use too little water, never apply uneven pressure. And Darnell had followed their rules for years, hoping obedience would earn opportunity. It never did. Tonight he broke every rule with intention. Small circles, light wrist, backwards pressure. He closed his eyes, letting his sense of touch guide him. The rhythm felt wrong by any professional standard, awkward, almost clumsy. But the paint responded differently, like it recognized the mistake and embraced it. When he wiped the hood clean, the glow returned, deeper, stronger than ever. His pulse jumped. He tried again, adjusting only one thing: pressure. Too hard, the glow dulled. Too soft, nothing happened. But when he found the exact weight, somewhere between caution and faith, the shine rose every time. He scribbled in the notebook, then tested again, then scribbled more. Half an hour passed, then an hour, then 2. His hands cramped, his back ached, but he didn't stop. Not when the shine kept blooming like something alive. By midnight, he had a pattern. By 1 a.m., he had consistency. By 2, He had something close to a formula. 3 sheets of cheap grit, 2 motions forward, 3 backward, minimal water, a cloth wipe at exactly the right second, still fragile, still experimental, but real. He stared at the shimmering surface, rich, wet-looking, almost mirror-deep. It didn't just reflect light, it seemed to hold it. He whispered, barely breathing, "Damn, I found something." But the room didn't allow him long to celebrate. The garage door creaked softly. Darnell spun, heart thudding. For a split second, he saw a shadow slip away from the cracked window, too fast to identify, but not fast enough to be nothing. He froze. The shine was no longer just a discovery. It was a target. His chest tightened. The shop talk, the rumor, Tommy's grin, the customers' questions. Someone was already watching. He crossed the room in 3 strides and peered out the window. The alley was empty except for a trash bin tipping in the wind. But his instincts, sharpened by years of being overlooked and underestimated, screamed that someone had been there, maybe listening, maybe spying, maybe waiting. He locked the door, then slid a wooden crate in front of it. It was the first time he'd ever barricaded the garage. He returned to the Buick, but now he felt exposed. Every sound in the building seemed louder, the pipes rattling upstairs, a neighbor coughing, footsteps echoing down the hallway. He forced himself to breathe, forced himself to focus. He bent over the notebook again, refining the steps. If someone was trying to learn what he'd found, then the only protection he had was speed, understanding the shine faster than they could take it. Hours passed. The lamp dimmed, his vision blurred, but the formula sharpened. Finally, near dawn, he leaned back against the cold wall and closed his eyes. Not from exhaustion, but from awe. He had something consistent now, something repeatable, something the world didn't know it needed yet. But before he could rest, a soft knock tapped at the door. Darnell, his mother's voice. He scrambled to slide the crate away and cracked the door open. Evelyn Carter stood in the hallway with a blanket around her shoulders, worry drawn into the lines of her face. "Baby, you've been out here all night." He nodded. "You eat anything?" "No." "You sleep?" "No." She stepped inside and shut the door, her eyes sweeping the hood without understanding what she was seeing. "What is that?" she whispered. Darnell hesitated. No one had seen it yet, not even her. But when he stepped aside, letting the trembling lamp fall across the shimmering panel, Evelyn gasped softly, covering her mouth. "That don't look like just paint," she said. "It's not," he replied. I think I found something nobody else has." She moved her fingers toward the hood, then stopped. "Can I?" "You can touch it," he said. When her fingertips brushed the surface, her breath caught. "Lord have mercy. Darnell, this is smooth as glass." "I know. This from those cheap papers you buy at the discount shop?" "Yes, ma'am." She rested her hand over his for a moment, warm, trembling, proud. "Your daddy used to say the Lord hides gifts in places people never look." She smiled faintly. "Seems like he hid one in you." Darnell swallowed, emotions rising too fast. "Mama, somebody saw me. Somebody's trying to figure it out." "Then you better finish it first," she said simply. Not scared, not shocked, just resolute. "Finish it," she repeated, "and make sure your name's on it." Her faith was heavier than any burden, but it was also the fire he needed. He nodded. "I will." She squeezed his wrist gently, then stepped back into the hall. "Come inside when you can, baby. Even men with gifts need sleep." When the door closed behind her, the garage felt different, less like a place of hiding, more like a forge. The shine wasn't an accident anymore. It was a formula, a future, a weapon, and someone out there wanted it. Darnell returned to the hood, hands steady now, and whispered, "I'm gonna finish this before anybody touches it." The wind rattled the door, the lamp steadied, and the glow on the Buick waited, quiet, patient, belonging to him alone. For now. Baltimore didn't change overnight, but people did. And in the days after Darnell discovered the pattern, the first fragile version of his formula, something in the air at Henderson's Auto Paint shifted. Men talked softer when he walked by. Conversations paused at the wrong moment. Even the owner, Mr. Henderson, looked at him longer than usual, as if trying to see what had changed before anyone else noticed. It wasn't paranoia, it was the start of the hunt. On Wednesday morning, the shop was already buzzing when Darnell arrived. He clocked in, wiped his hands on a rag, and headed toward the back to prep a set of fenders. But before he even picked up a tool, Tommy's voice pierced the room. "Hey, Carter," he called out loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Got a question for you." Darnell kept his back turned. "Not in the mood today, man." "Oh, I think you are." Tommy strolled closer, dragging a stool behind him. He sat down right beside Darnell's workstation, crossing his arms with a grin too casual to be innocent. "Word is, you've been hiding something." The rag froze between Darnell's fingers. "Word is wrong." "That's so." Tommy leaned in. "Because customers been asking for you by name, and Henderson's been asking what you're doing at home, and I've been hearing about some new shine." Darnell didn't look at him. "You hear too damn much." "Maybe, but maybe you're the reason people are talking." Tommy scooted closer, his voice turning sharp. So why don't you tell me what you did, huh? What's the trick? There is no trick. Tommy slammed his palm on the metal bench, making every tool rattle. Don't lie to me, boy. The shop went silent. All eyes turned. It wasn't the word boy that hit Darnell. It was the satisfaction on Tommy's face, the need to put him back in the place the world expected him to stay. Darnell stood slowly, fists clenched at his sides. Don't call me that again. Tommy rose too, chest puffed. Or what? You'll shine me up with that secret little formula of yours? A few men laughed. Henderson didn't. He stepped into the commotion, wiping grease from his hands as he approached. What's going on here? Tommy pointed at Darnell. He's been doing side work with something special he ain't telling nobody about. Henderson turned to Darnell. Is that true? All eyes were on him. Pressure crawled up his spine. I do side jobs, yeah, Darnell said. Same as half the men here. That's not what he asked, Tommy snapped. Darnell inhaled through his nose, steady. Ain't nothing special, just working harder, Tommy snorted. Yeah, right, harder. He's hiding something, I know it. Henderson studied Darnell's face. The silence in the room drew tight as wire. Finally, Henderson spoke. Carter, keep anything you do after hours off my floor. I don't care what you're playing with at home, but don't bring it here. Tommy stepped forward. So we're just letting him… That's enough, Henderson barked. For a moment, Tommy looked like he might argue, but the older man's glare froze him in place. Still, when Henderson turned away, Tommy leaned in close to Darnell's ear. I'm going to find out what you're hiding. Darnell didn't answer. Silence was safer than truth. The rest of the day passed in that same uneasy haze. Every shift of metal, every buzz of machinery felt like background noise to something brewing just under the surface. Resentment, suspicion, maybe even jealousy. Men who'd known him for years looked at him differently, as though he'd broken an invisible rule about how far someone like him was allowed to reach. By evening, he walked out of the shop with his shoulders hunched, feeling heavier than he had in months. The sky held a dull red glow as he made his way back toward the tenement. When he reached the alley behind the building, he stopped cold. The garage door was slightly open. He hadn't left it that way. His pulse jumped. He pushed the door open fast and stepped inside. The lamp was on, swaying gently. Tools were scattered. The sandpaper sheets he'd carefully organized were out of place. And the Buick's hood, his test surface, his proof, his first real step towards something bigger, was covered in long, ugly scratches like someone had taken a metal brush to it. It felt like a punch to the throat. Someone had been here. Someone had tried to erase his work. He rushed to the hood and ran his palm across the damaged streaks. The shine was gone, destroyed. The glow he'd coaxed from the paint with hours of work had been scraped off thoughtlessly, violently. He sank to his knees beside the car, breath shaking. For a moment, he wasn't 32 years old. He was 14 again, staring at the uniformed men who told him his father was dead. That same hollow feeling, that same helplessness, that same quiet rage that burned his insides. He closed his eyes. He forced his breath to slow. He stayed there in silence until his heartbeat steadied, and then he stood. Someone wanted him to quit. Someone wanted him scared. Someone wanted him small again. But poverty had shaped him sharper than that. He picked up the sandpaper, the cheap kind, the kind that started all of this, and held it between his fingers like a promise. You can scratch the hood, he whispered, voice trembling but steadying, but you ain't scratching what's in my hands. He spent the next 3 hours repairing the damage, not to recreate the shine, but to rebuild the space, to reclaim the ground the intruder had tried to steal. By the time he finished, exhaustion dragged at his limbs, but determination held him upright. He wrote one sentence on the last page of his notebook, pressing the pencil so hard it nearly tore the paper. I won't be stolen. He shut the notebook. He turned off the lamp, and as he locked the garage behind him, the cold Baltimore wind brushed past his face like a warning and a dare. Tomorrow, the fight would get bigger. He could feel it now. But tonight, for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the fight. For days after the break-in, Darnell moved like a man carrying something fragile and dangerous inside him. The formula hadn't left his mind for a single second. Even while he worked at Henderson's shop, his hands doing the familiar motions of sanding and polishing, his thoughts kept drifting back to the notebook, hidden under a loose floorboard in the garage. The damage to the Buick hood still haunted him, but not in the way whoever did it intended. Instead of fear, it had awakened something sharper, a decision he hadn't known he was ready to make. He wasn't going to hide forever. One cold Saturday morning, the alley behind the tenement filled with the clatter of metal, as it always did. But today there was another sound, the steady rhythm of Darnell mixing, sanding, wiping, testing. He had spent the entire night building a new surface to replace the ruined hood, a fresh canvas to continue refining the formula. And as the sun crept up between the buildings, the shine emerged again, deep, unmistakable. It was real, it was his, and it was ready. Just as the glow reached its richest tone, footsteps echoed behind him. "Damn, Carter, what you doing to that car?" He turned. It was Leon Jacobs, a neighborhood mechanic known for fixing engines out of his backyard shed. Leon was older, wiser, a man whose hands looked permanently stained with oil. He wasn't the gossiping type, and most importantly, he wasn't Tommy. Darnell wiped his hands on a cloth. "Just working." Leon stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "That ain't just work. I ain't never seen paint look like that." Darnell hesitated. Letting anyone see the formula felt dangerous, but Leon wasn't the kind of man to steal. He was the kind who understood struggle, who'd buried brothers, lost jobs, and seen enough unfairness to know what belonged to who. "It's something I figured out," Darnell said quietly. Leon leaned in, studying the shine. He didn't touch. It was a sign of respect. "How long it take?" "My whole life," Darnell said, surprising himself with the truth of it. Leon nodded slowly. "You selling this?" The question landed like a spark. Darnell hadn't said the words out loud yet. He hadn't even fully allowed himself to consider the possibility. But now, with the formula gleaming in the cold morning light, the idea wasn't a dream. It was a step. "I could," he said, "if someone wanted it." Leon straightened, rubbing his chin. "I got 2 customers this week want their paint looking better than new. If you willing to give me a bottle of whatever this is, I'll pay. And if it works, folks gonna be lining up." Darnell swallowed. Payment, not curiosity, not rumor, not theft. Payment. "How much?" Darnell asked. Leon shrugged. "What's it worth?" Darnell didn't know. Money had always come to him in small, careful amounts. Never enough to set a price on something that came from his own hands. $5? He attempted. Leon laughed once, not mocking, just stunned. "Carter, if this shine holds, $5 is an insult to God himself." Darnell blinked. "10, then. Make it 20, Leon said. "And I ain't doing charity. I want the real deal." Darnell nodded, heart thudding. "Come back in an hour," he said. Leon left without another word, and in that silence Darnell realized what he'd agreed to. He was about to sell the first bottle of something that didn't exist in any catalog or shop. Something born out of cold nights, cheap sandpaper, and desperation. Something someone had already tried to steal. He got to work immediately. He mixed the solution with precision, measured water, the exact amount of rubbing compound, and the unpredictable but magic element, the grit dust shaved from the cheap sandpaper after his backward circle technique. That grit carried the reaction. The formula wasn't the liquid alone. It was the combination of liquid and the method. That was the secret. That was the piece no one could steal by simply looking. He poured the mixture into a small glass bottle that once held his mother's vanilla extract. The shine inside swirled like dark honey. When Leon returned, he looked at the bottle like it was treasure. "Damn, Carter. Looks like something special." "It is," Darnell said. Leon handed him a folded 20. "I'll be back tomorrow." "If it works, you better be ready to make more." The bill felt heavy in Darnell's hand. Too heavy. He slipped it into his pocket as if someone might try to take it from him. Leon nodded once, a man's version of a promise, and left. Darnell stayed in the garage long after, staring at the spot where Leon had been standing. Selling the formula wasn't just money, it was a shift in identity. For the first time, someone wasn't paying him for labor. They were paying him for knowledge, for something only he had. That night as he walked back inside, his mother looked up from her chair. "You were out there a long time," she said. He placed the 20 on the table. Her eyes widened. "You steal this?" "No, ma'am." "Then what did you do?" "I sold something." She stood slowly, picking up the bill like it might dissolve. "What did you sell?" "The shine," he said simply. Evelyn pressed her fingers to her lips, then whispered, "Lord, your daddy would have shouted so loud the heavens would echo." She hugged him, tightly, fiercely, like she was holding the past and the future at once. "Do it again," she whispered against his shoulder. "Sell another. Build something. Make our name stand for something." Darnell nodded. The next morning, Leon returned with 2 more men, both of them holding cars that shimmered beautifully in the weak Baltimore light. They weren't here to question, they were here to buy. And as Darnell placed 3 more small bottles into their hands, a truth settled in his chest so heavy and so bright he almost couldn't breathe. This wasn't a side job anymore. This was the start of a business. A poor man in a tenement garage had created something bigger than his circumstances, and Baltimore, for the first time, was beginning to notice. The business didn't explode all at once. It crept, like most good things in poor neighborhoods do, quietly, carefully, growing in the spaces where hope usually dies. A week after Leon first bought the formula, the alley behind the tenement saw a different kind of traffic. Men with dusty jackets, teenagers with beat-up Chevys, old heads who'd been fixing cars since Eisenhower was president. They all came, one by one, slipping into the garage with a nod and leaving with a small glass bottle wrapped in newspaper. No labels, no brand, just trust. And the results spoke louder than advertising ever could. Whenever the morning sun passed across someone's hood, conversations started. Whenever a car gleamed too deep, too smooth, too alive for its age, whispers followed. What did you put on that paint? Where'd you get that shine? Who did that for you? And the answer, always spoken quietly, almost protectively, was the same: Carter. But while the neighborhood celebrated, trouble brewed in places Darnell couldn't see. That Thursday, two men in button-up coats came into Henderson's shop. They didn't look like customers. They looked like people who ordered customers around. They headed straight to the back where Henderson kept his ledgers. Darnell watched from across the room as the men whispered to the boss, pointing, nodding, glancing in his direction. Henderson's face tightened, not angry, calculating. Later, when most of the workers were out grabbing lunch, Henderson approached Darnell. "You've been busy at home," he said. Darnell didn't like the tone. "I do my own work after hours. Always have. This is different." Henderson crossed his arms. "I've had people asking me if I sell that shine you got. I never said you did. You selling it pretty damn close to my business. Your business don't sell what I make." A dangerous spark lit in Henderson's eyes. "You know the rule, Carter. Anything developed by my boys while they're working for me belongs to me." Darnell felt heat rise up his neck. "I didn't develop it here." Henderson stepped closer. "But you work here. Means you got skills here. Which means maybe you used something I taught you. I learned nothing from you that made this. Watch your tone." "No," Darnell said, steady. "This one thing is mine." The silence between them turned cold. Then Henderson smiled, thin, sharp, a smile that meant he wasn't done. "We'll talk again," he said. Darnell didn't respond, but as he walked home that night, he felt something crawling at the back of his neck, the feeling of being followed not by footsteps, but by interest, the wrong kind. He reached the tenement and hurried inside the garage. The moment the lamp lit up, he exhaled in relief. Everything was as he left it. The bottles lined up, the tools, the Buick, the notebook hidden, but the air felt watched. He closed the door behind him and braced a crate against it. Within an hour, 3 customers came, Leon first, then 2 young guys from Sandtown. They bought quietly, quickly, paying in folded bills and nods of gratitude. But when the last one left and the alley grew silent again, a soft tapping came from the side window. Not loud, not urgent, just deliberate. Darnell froze. The tapping repeated. He edged toward the window, keeping his footsteps slow, soft. When he reached it, he peeked through the corner. A white man in a gray overcoat stood in the alley, hands in his pockets, looking directly at the garage door. His shoes were polished, too polished for this neighborhood. He wasn't lost. He wasn't curious. He was waiting. Darnell backed away. The tapping stopped. Minutes passed. Silence returned. Then footsteps. The man walked away, but not before pausing at the mouth of the alley, turning back to memorize the garage's location. That was the night Darnell knew the shine wasn't just attracting customers, it was attracting hunters. Inside the garage, he tightened every cap on every bottle. He moved his tools to hidden spots, and he took out the notebook, the heart of everything, and shoved it deep beneath a missing floor tile. Then he sat down on an overturned crate and pressed his palms against his face. This wasn't just business. This wasn't just opportunity. This was a race against people who had more money, more power, and more access to lawyers, patents, and police. If they wanted what he had, they could take it and bury him in paperwork or something worse. His mother appeared at the doorway, wrapped in her thin coat, hair tied in a scarf. "You're sitting awful still," she said. He didn't lift his head. "I think people are coming for the formula." "Of course they are," she said, stepping inside. "Anything worth having draws eyes." "I don't have protection. I don't have a business. I don't even have labels." "You have a gift," she said firmly, "and you have what most men don't. Community." He looked up. "Community won't stop the wrong people." She came closer and placed a hand on his cheek. "Your daddy once told you, Carter men don't get scared when folks come looking. They get smart. So get smart, baby." He swallowed hard. "I don't know how." "Yes, you do." She pointed toward the bottles. "You already started something that won't fit in this garage much longer. You need help. Real help. Someone who won't steal from you." Her words settled in his chest. heavy and true. He needed allies. He needed to scale. He needed a way to outrun anyone trying to trap him. But the garage door shook suddenly, just once, like a fist testing its strength, and both of them jumped. Through the wooden slats, two shadows moved past, then disappeared. His mother squeezed his arm. "It's time to protect what's yours." Darnell stared at the bottles, the tools, the car. The formula wasn't finished yet, not fully, but it was strong enough to draw danger. And tomorrow, he'd have to grow faster than the shadows following him. He tightened his fists. "Tomorrow," he whispered to himself, "I find someone honest." And the shine on the Buick, faint in the low light, seemed to agree, glowing with a promise and a warning all at once. The first real break didn't come from Baltimore. It came from a man who didn't belong anywhere near the tenement, a tall collector from Pennsylvania who drove into the alley with a restored '66 Pontiac GTO and a curiosity that looked a lot like hunger. His name was Raymond Wolfe, and he had a face that seemed carved from winter, sharp, cold, but aware of everything. He stepped out of the car slowly, his polished boots crunching against broken glass. "You Carter?" he asked. Darnell nodded, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Who sent you?" "A shine like this," the man said, running a gloved hand across his GTO's hood, "has been showing up on cars all over the East Coast. Someone told me the man behind it lives in a back alley garage in West Baltimore." Darnell felt his chest tighten. Word had traveled farther than he imagined. Wolfe pointed at the garage. "Show me." Darnell hesitated, but something inside him, maybe instinct, maybe destiny, pushed him forward. He lifted the top from the Buick he'd been using as his laboratory. The hood glowed with the deep, wet shine Darnell had perfected over months of sleepless nights. Wolfe froze. "That's not paint," he whispered. "That's art." For a long moment he just stared, the glow reflecting in his pale eyes. Then he turned sharply. "How much?" "For what?" Darnell asked. "For a batch. A real amount. Enough to treat a dozen cars." Darnell swallowed hard. "That ain't cheap." "Good," Wolfe said. "Neither am I." Darnell had sold small bottles before, enough to keep the lights on, enough to keep the neighborhood buzzing. But now he was standing at the edge of something bigger, something he wasn't sure he was ready for. Wolfe removed a leather envelope from his coat. Inside it, thick stacks of bills. $5,000. Cash. "I want everything you have today," Wolfe said, "and I want to commission a larger order next month." The garage went silent. The world outside felt suddenly far away. The shouting neighbors, the cold wind, the smell of smoke. All Darnell could hear was his heartbeat. He took a slow step forward. "You don't even know what's in it." Wolfe's expression didn't change. "I know what I see, and I know what it's worth. Don't play small, Carter. Not with me." Darnell stared at the money, not with disbelief, with realization. This wasn't a garage hustle anymore. This was a business, a real one that could lift him and his mother out of the tenement forever. He held out his hand. Wolfe shook it, firm, decisive, the kind of handshake that seals fate. And just like that, the first serious sale was done. What followed was a storm. Wolfe returned a month later with a trailer full of classic cars, Mustangs, Chevelles, Camaros, Chargers. He wanted every one of them coated with Carter shine, as he called it. Soon, Wolfe's collector friends found out. Then restorers, then auto clubs, then car show judges from Richmond, Philadelphia, New York. Orders flooded in. Not one bottle, not two, dozens, then hundreds. Darnell had to hire 2 young men from the neighborhood, Marcus and Everett, to help mix bottle and pack orders. He didn't trust most people, but those boys grew up just like he had, carrying the same hunger in their eyes. They worked hard, they asked no questions, and the money kept coming. 20,000, 40, 60. By the end of that first year, Darnell had earned more money than he had ever seen in his life. But the number that made him sit down, hand trembling, was the one he tallied on a cold December night while his mother slept. $402,750. $402,750. All from a garage that barely kept out the wind. He stared at the number, then looked at his hands. The same hands that once shook counting quarters for gas. The same hands Henderson made feel small. The same hands that had been scraped raw years earlier, sanding cars no one remembered. Now they held a future. But Baltimore had a way of reminding men that nothing came without a price. One night, as Darnell was bottling an order, his mother walked into the garage, her steps slow, her face pale. "Darnell," she said softly. Someone was at the door. He wiped his hands. "Who?" She handed him a folded note. The message was short. "We know what you're doing. You owe us a piece. We'll come talk tomorrow night." No name, no signature, but the tone, he knew it. Everyone in Baltimore knew it. The kind of men who didn't ask, the kind who took. Darnell set the note down slowly. He felt something old rise inside him. Fear, yes. but something stronger too. Something built from all the years of being underestimated, ignored, and pushed aside. He walked to the center of the garage, stood beneath the lamp, and closed his eyes. He had crossed a line poor men rarely crossed without someone trying to drag them back. He inhaled deeply. "We can't stay here," he said. His mother looked at him with worry and pride mixed together. "Then where do we go?" Darnell didn't have the details yet, but he had the conviction. A real shop, a real business, something with walls that don't shake when the wind blows. He looked at the dozens of bottles lined on the shelf, at the notebook beneath the floorboard, at the glow on the Buick that started it all. "No more hiding," he said. The wind outside rattled the alley door, but this time Darnell didn't flinch. $400,000 wasn't luck. It was proof. Proof he'd built something no one could deny. Proof he had something worth fighting for. Proof that for the first time in Carter history, the next move belonged to him. He lifted the lamp toward the Buick's hood. The shine held steady, like a promise. The night after the warning note arrived, the alley behind the tenement didn't feel like home anymore. The cold seemed sharper, the shadows thicker. Every footstep echoed with possibility, good or bad. But Darnell Carter wasn't the same man he'd been months earlier. Fear was still there, yes, but it was quieter than his conviction. Money changes things. Success changes things. But responsibility changes a man the deepest, and he felt all three pressing on him as he locked the garage door for the very last time. Inside, his mother stood near the shelves of bottled formula, her hands resting on the glass like she was touching pieces of his future. Marcus and Everett waited by the doorway, bags packed, ready to help however they could. "This place won't hold you anymore," Evelyn said softly. It was never meant to. She was right. The garage had given birth to his discovery. It had protected him, betrayed him, humbled him. It carried fingerprints of storms, secrets, and sacrifice, but it could not carry what came next. Darnell took one last look around, the wooden planks, the cracked floor, the Buick that had served as his laboratory. Then he whispered, "Thank you," under his breath, because even places deserve gratitude when they've held a man through his becoming. He closed the door, for good. The new shop was 10 blocks away, a vacant brick building once used as a small upholstery warehouse. The rent was steep, but Darnell paid it without shaking. He could feel something shifting inside him, a kind of courage that comes only when a man has dragged himself through enough nights to earn daylight. Marcus and Everett helped set up the tables, the mixing station, the shelves for bottling. By morning, the space smelled of paint, metal, ambition, and a little fear. "This," Marcus said, "this looks like a real damn company." "It is," Darnell replied. He ordered new tools, better lighting, heavy locks, steel shutters for the windows. The place transformed in weeks, turning from a forgotten building into a humming workshop filled with the rhythm of possibility. The neighborhood noticed first, then car clubs, then auto shops. Soon, even the kind of customers who never stepped foot in West Baltimore, the wealthier ones, the collectors, the people who lived behind gates instead of flimsy doors, began calling, asking for appointments, asking for prices, asking for the Carter shine by name. But Darnell didn't forget where he came from. He put a sign on the front door, "Local youth training accepted." He didn't hire experienced men. He hired kids from the block, the same boys who used to wander the alley with nothing but trouble at their heel. He turned them into mixers, buffers, polishers, packers. Some were rough around the edges. Some didn't know how to show up on time. But he taught them anyway, because someone had taught him, long before the world noticed. Within months, 15 young workers stood where the echoes of the empty building had once lived. 15 kids learning a craft, learning precision, learning pride. One afternoon, as Darnell watched Everett teach a younger teen how to hold the cloth at the perfect angle, he felt something settle in his chest, something warm, something right. He was no longer just making shine, he was making men, building futures, creating legacy. But legacy is often clearest in quiet moments. One evening, after everyone had left, Darnell sat on the shop floor with his mother. The sun was setting through the steel shutters, casting orange lines across the concrete. "You tired?" she asked. "I'm a different kind of tired," he said. "The kind that feels like building instead of breaking." She smiled softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Your daddy used to tell you that men don't grow from what they get. They grow from what they give." "I didn't always understand him," Darnell whispered. "You do now." He nodded. Silence stretched comfortably. filled with memories the world had almost forgotten, the whistle of trains from years past. The nights his mother hummed gospel while rinsing laundry, his father's heavy boots on the wooden floors, and then the lean years, the cold nights, the hunger, the fear of staying stuck in the same place forever. But now the air felt different. He could breathe in a way he'd never known. "Ma," he finally said, voice low, "I want you to stop working." She laughed once, thin, amazed, disbelieving. "Baby, I ain't worked in weeks. Haven't you noticed? These old bones get to rest now." He froze. Then he looked at her hands, smooth, softening, no longer torn and raw. "How long?" he asked. "Since you opened this place," she said. "I figured if my son could make the whole damn East Coast shine, he could carry his mama too." His throat tightened. He couldn't speak. She patted his knee gently. "You brought us out, Darnell. You did it." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, shaking his head. "Not alone. No one climbs alone," she said. "But someone always climbs first. And you were that someone." He closed his eyes as her words sank into him. The next morning, the shop opened its doors to the biggest crowd yet. Not customers, neighbors, families, kids, old men who'd seen too much, women tired from work, but hopeful enough to smile. They weren't buying, they were witnessing, because the Carter shine wasn't just polish now, it was proof. Proof that a man from a tenement garage could rewrite the script people tried to hand him. Proof that struggle could bloom into opportunity, that mistakes could turn into formulas, that poverty could lose. They clapped as he stepped outside. They clapped louder when he raised his hands, and louder still when he said, "This shop belongs to all of us. I started it, but it's yours too." Someone shouted his father's name. Someone else shouted his mother's. A third person shouted, "Carter's building a future." And in that moment, surrounded by faces that had known hunger, eviction notices, broken heaters, and nights colder than truth, Darnell realized what the shine really was. Not a product, not a business, not even a formula. It was a light, one born in darkness, one meant to last. And as the crowd cheered, as the shutters gleamed, as the workshop hummed with life, the legacy of the shine finally revealed itself. This was bigger than him. This was for generations.